Hey, what's up, everybody? I hope you guys could hear us. I hope you guys doing good, by the way. We are here. Today we're gonna talk about are boot camps worth it? And we have a great guest today who I'm gonna introduce in just a minute. But welcome to Coffee Code and Chat. It's gonna be a lot of fun. And like I said, today's topic is gonna be are boot camps worth it? And I'd love to hear what our guest's gonna say. So without any ado, let me bring out my guest. He's a good friend of mine, Yorgos. Hey Yorgos, what's up? How's it going? Thank you for your time. And so
Hey,
I'm like, man, such a good looking dude. I just get like a little flustered a bit, but that's okay. We're gonna get right into it. Right into it. We want to talk about boot camps, not about handsome individuals. No, but I'm just kidding. All kidding aside, Yorgos is a really good friend of mine. We've been friends forever, and the reason why I wanted to bring him up is because he decided to switch careers, and he'll tell us all about that in just a moment. Just recently, and he decided to learn to code, and he decided to take the path of going and taking boot camp. So before we start, why don't you give us a quick introduction of what you've done before, who you are, and then why you decided to switch careers?
yeah, so essentially, I got some degrees in basically strength and conditioning and nutrition and exercise, that kind of field, and I did that for a bit. And after some time, I felt like what really drew me was the socio-emotional aspect, so I went to social work, and that was like honestly a dream career in a lot of ways. However, I found that the for anyone who's in the mental health field will know that it's a severely overworked field, high burnout, high turnover rate, and I was already seeing it very early on. And so, in order to kind of like practice what I preached and taking care of myself and my own mental health, I thought it would be better for me to take a break by focusing on a new venture. And coding was always something that was really interesting to me. Like I loved the idea of learning a new language and building something with it and being able to create something from nothing, and on top of that solving problems, thinking about things systematically. These were all things I kind of did anyway in other careers, but to have it focused was really attractive to me, so I thought I'd give it a shot previously with some courses, and then as we'll talk about in bootcamp.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And so why not just jump right into it? Which bootcamp did you end up choosing, and what was your reasoning behind choosing that particular bootcamp?
Yeah, I went with General Assembly, and it's quite the process. I went through a lot of different boot camps. Certainly not all that there are. I've actually found when I was like looking through just how many boot camps there are now. I think the field has really blown up coding boot camps,
Yeah.
and they are not only just for software engineering now. They're also for data science and
Oh
UI
wow.
UX, and that which is it's relevant because actually I wasn't immediately thinking about going into software engineering. My first thought was to go into data analytics, and then from there, when I kind of was finding out what did I like about the data analytics, I did like the data, but the coding was what really enamored me. Um, so when I chose General Assembly, it was one amongst many, and essentially what I found was every boot camp. I don't want to like. I'm not sure how to start because the idea is I don't want to lump them all together because I haven't done every
Right.
boot camp, right?
Yeah.
But from the surface, when you're doing the research, they all kind of look pretty similar, with the exception of how much they cost, how long they take, and to some degree what they teach you. I think for the most part, a lot of the like, there's not going to be a software engineering bootcamp that doesn't teach you JavaScript. That just I can't imagine that existing, right? But on the other hand, when they teach a secondary language, some teach Ruby on Rails
Yep.
and Ruby and Rails, and then teach Python and Django, and then some teach. They try to teach you a little bit of everything, and uh, it's it was just quite the range. And I did this. I chose by basically I talked to some friends who had been in boot camps or friends who knew boot camps. I talked to a lot of admission staff who connected me with alumni of boot camps. And essentially, what it came down to was a combination of like financial pressures because I had to make a choice quick, right? If I wasn't working,
Yep.
I was like full on focused on. I was teaching myself at the time, and so I had to make a choice. Like, do I choose a boot camp? It has to be sooner than later, and it has to be the right boot camp. And it was initially at the, or sorry, by the end, it was between Flatiron and General Assembly. And the only thing that kind of made the decision for me was Flatiron was teaching Ruby and Rails in addition to
Yeah.
all the other stuff like Java, React, Node, all that stuff. And I had talked to some of my friends who were telling me that Ruby and Rails was kind of declining in terms of popularity. So that kind of
Yeah.
made the choice when I chose General Assembly for Python and Django as their secondary stack.
Yeah, and that's amazing. It's totally true about Ruby. And I'm still surprised that there's boot camps that still kind of teach something like Ruby on Rails. And I can't imagine if you didn't do your due diligence and didn't ask around and decided to go to that other boot camp and learn Ruby on Rails, like you're still like maybe would have been able to find a job, but I think you're right. It would have been like much more difficult. So what was the tech stack that they're taught at the boot camp that you chose to go to, or General Assembly, I guess?
Yeah, real quick before that, it's actually kind of funny because when my friend told me about the Ruby's declining, I talked to that admission guy again because they're pretty persistent, and I
Yeah.
was like, hey, so I talked to some of my friends and they said this is declining. Like, why are you guys teaching an outdated or soon to be outdated technology? And the dude kind of told me straight up, which I appreciated. I'm not trying to throw him under the bus. I respect him immensely for this. He's like, yeah, we're having talks about replacing it and updating the curriculum. That's in the midst of happening right now. But for now, our next cohort is in Ruby on Rails. But that's basically how I made the decision. I was like, even the dude trying to
Yeah.
like not poach
Sell
me,
it.
but
Yeah.
like
But yeah,
his
get you
commission
to
is
go.
yeah.
That's crazy when you make money by getting a commission per student. How you like if you never asked that question, like so I appreciate that he was honest by the way, but if you never asked that question, he could have like, he just been like, yeah, yeah, this is perfect. But it's crazy being driven by commission that you know that the thing might not be right, but you're still trying to get students in. And so I think like your point is very important that people should do their due diligence and figure out, that they're learning the right technologies. And so you decided to go into boot camp. Why boot camp in particular? Because so many people go the self-taught route, and I'm playing like devil's advocate, saying that maybe self-taught route is better. Maybe it's not. I mean, I have my opinion about it, but I want to hear from your standpoint. Why did you decide to just go boot camp versus like self route?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's a question I asked myself a lot in the beginning because I was initially doing self-taught and I kind of was leaning towards more doing that. Um, and if I'm being honest, the cost for boot camp was like prohibitive. I mean, it's like to be like flat
Not
out, I
cheap.
paid about, or I'm in paying in installments, 15,000, right?
Wow.
And they do have an income-driven plan. What is it called? ISA, I think,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
where you only pay once you get a job,
I,
which has
I,
been really popular now. But the trick with that is that essentially what you end up doing is if you there's like some stipulation in paying in a certain amount of time, but what happens is
yep.
whatever amount you're supposed to pay, you pay 1.5 times that in the end,
Wow. Yeah.
um,
So
because
that's
of
more
like what
expensive.
they do. Yeah, so I was like, I'd rather just pay in installments, and
I, I,
frankly,
I
like,
think you did the right choice, by the way. I think that was totally right to do that.
yeah, it's a bit of a hedge to be honest, because even like now as I'm job hunting, it depends like when can I get a job sooner rather than later. So as I'm paying the installments, it doesn't hurt me financially too much. So I hope I
Yeah.
did, but we'll find out
Yeah.
in the end. We don't know.
Yeah. By the way, all of you guys in the chat, feel free to ask questions. I mean, this is not just me talking to my friend Yorgos, but this is like for you guys to also ask questions. Maybe there's something I miss. And so, um, anyway, continuing on this question, what still made you decide to go to bootcamp versus the self-taught route? I guess like, did you feel like having a program which you could follow that has a start and an end and certain expectations just felt like that would be a better way to guide your learning rather than trying to kind of beat around the bush by trying to get those resources yourself?
You know, if I'm being like 100% honest, it wasn't even that because I on Udemy, there's some fantastic courses on Udemy, that give you the structure and will literally tell you this is what you need. Like I literally bought one for $15 on a Udemy
That's
sale.
amazing.
That was like it's called the Web Developers Bootcamp 2022 with this really fantastic teacher called Colt Steele, who I
Oh
highly
yeah,
recommend
amazing,
because
amazing guy.
you know him too.
I know. First of all, let me
His
tell you my
I
thing
love
about Udemy. Let me tell you my thing about Udemy. I
yeah.
spent probably like $4,000 on buying every possible course on Udemy, which is the biggest mistake. I should have like put that money towards bootcamp or invested in somewhere. So I tell people, don't make the mistake I made. Like 4 or 5 courses is enough, 12 bucks a piece. But I have over like 600 something, 700 courses. But I have probably Cold Steel is good. Yeah, it's a good, pretty good course. Um, so yeah. So go on, go on.
Yeah, I'm glad you like him too, though. It's good. Yeah, it's like weird to be a fan of like a coding teacher because like I've went through a few courses and some of them like I think it's a little underestimated how important a good teacher is because it's a complicated subject, right? Coding can really
Right.
get in the weeds. So if you don't have someone that can explain it well, you can really screw yourself over. But Cold Steel was fantastic.
Yeah.
So having said that, though, the main things that kind of were barriers for me in going completely self-taught was basically just time and motivation. Like I had to
Right.
ask myself, like with complete honesty, like rigorous honesty, will you be able to sustain your motivation hardcore, like a full-time job, and learn like intensely, like basically immerse yourself, right, in
Yeah.
this course where everything is based off of you? And I honestly had to answer like, no, I think I could do it for 1 month, maybe. But I know myself, and I know that I would get bored or get distracted or lose focus. And there's something about having like a community around you with instructors, expectations, and deadlines that really help like drive you forward.
Nice.
And on top of that, the second thing that the important factor other than motivation was essentially the job placement.
Oh, nice.
So a lot of these boot camps have, like outcome teams essentially, which are like fancy way of saying people who help you actually just get a job and prepare you to get a job and prepare you for interviews. And so like what these boot camps actually boast isn't like we have the best teachers. What they boast is like we have a 96% job placement rate within X amount of days or months. So that's what they're like really selling to you with this money, not as much like we're going to teach you how to code great, which like may or may not happen, right? They're saying we're going to get you a job. We're going to get you a foot in the door.
Yeah, no, that's really awesome. And so we have a couple of good questions, by the way, before we continue, because I want to make it open to everybody who's in the chat. Feel free to ask questions. So the first question is, um, in your opinion, it comes from Brian. He says, hold on, let me scroll up here. Where's that question? I have too many screens open. Um, it's not even showing up, so I was going to bring it up on the screen. But he says, did the boot camps teach you anything you couldn't find on Udemy or YouTube? Um, that was the question. Did the
Oh,
boot camp
yeah,
teach you
that's
anything
a
you couldn't find on Udemy or YouTube?
yeah, so from like a purely coding perspective of like let's say technologies and frameworks, like absolutely you can find everything on Udemy. I think what they taught more than anything was like the intangibles in some ways, like how do you work in a team, like what is the proper procedure for working in a team? How do you
Nice.
what happens when you're building a project when something goes wrong? Like what's the proper way to debug? So it's not just like learning what does Express do and how do you use it. It's also talking about like what's the best way to break down a problem, what's a common thing to expect, stuff like that. Which I mean, who knows? Maybe even Udemy has stuff like that. I don't actually know all the courses on Udemy, but it's nice to have a human being who has that like experience that can speak to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think on Udemy, that's the issue is that you don't know what the course is going to teach until you really dive into it. And I think having that prepackaged deal with boot camps is definitely is worth it in like a lot of cases, especially depends like, if you have a time constraint or how driven are you, or do you even want to spend the time on your own trying to comb through all the free resources on Udemy or I mean YouTube or paid resources on Udemy, try to create a curriculum that could be easily to get lost. And then another great question: did you work with a group, and do you think that an advantage of a boot camp, if you did, meaning like, and you kind of touched on it, is that idea that you're working with other people and you're learning like the best practices of how to work on a team?
Oh, like 100%. That's huge because as they reiterated, like working in a group is a big part of like, I mean, you could probably talk to this better than I can, Paul, but like they were saying that you don't work by yourself really. Like you're always in a team, you're working in a group, and you're doing these like projects at scale most of the time. So with this like idea of a coder sitting in a room by himself building an app by himself is like a myth, right? Like it's all about the team. So like being able
Yeah,
to not just like build something and learn how to collaborate, but also the important thing of like it's really it's really humbling when you're working together and coding and all the technologies you have to learn are so widespread. So you're not going to ever know everything, or so it's really helpful to have a team to fill in each other's knowledge gaps.
yeah,
And there's even this thing, for example, called mob programming that we've got to practice, where it's kind of like a little bit of pressure, but essentially it's like the whole team is programming through one person, and so you're kind of condensing everybody's knowledge into one person. We got to do that, and that was like really interesting because you learn what they know through doing it yourself, and
yeah.
it's like a fascinating practice. I think it's like lean programming, right, or something like that.
Yeah. I think like it's a good point you bring up is because if it's hard for you to find a community on your own, like doing it through bootcamp and getting access to a community, other people that are on the same path, is actually could be that thing that will help you to actually make your process of learning much easier because you have this whole community that you belong to and could get help from. But Brian's asking all the tough questions. He goes, were the instructors people they had experience in the field, or were there other bootcamp grads that haven't found jobs yet? Damn, Brian, the nerve you have.
No,
Seriously.
no, that's a good question. No, because
It's
like
an excellent
legit,
question.
Brian.
Excellent question. Brian,
Yeah,
excellent question. Excellent question,
because
Brian.
Brian, this is literally what I was worried about when I was going in because I was reading this on a lot of forums that like a lot of the boot camp teachers were just people who had went through the same boot camp and couldn't get jobs and then were like working there. And I will say there was definitely because we had like the head teaching staff, we had instructional staff, and then we had TAs. So the TAs were definitely those people, 100%. And that's
Yeah.
not to say they weren't good at their. Some of them were like the top of the class, like ridiculously good, and some of them, to be honest with you, were like okay, not like bad, but like okay.
Yeah.
But the instructional staff and the how do I put it, the head and then the assistants, they were like amazing. They all had experience. A few of them had computer science degrees. Some of them were self-taught, but they were all working in other in like actual companies before this, and they all had extensive experience. They were like super knowledgeable.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. When you started your boot camp, like, what was your experience initially learning from someone who basically had very basic understanding, or maybe even no understanding of what you're going to be learning compared to other students? I mean, I also remember that story you told me how you had that one kid who created like what was it, Mario clone with JavaScript and CSS, which was like his first day of
Oh my
work or
god,
something. Ridiculous.
I don't want to call him out in case he sees this, but I was kind of like fuck that guy because he was he, we had a unit one project which was supposed to be like relatively simple. It's just
Yeah,
JavaScript,
yeah,
HTML, and DOM manipulation, right? And this dude builds Dr. Mario while everyone else is doing like a basic ass game.
yeah,
And I was
yeah.
just like, yo, are you fucking kidding me right now? But this is all to say there was like a huge range of experience levels within the boot camp. Um, and it really showed in the first unit and less so in the later units because I think you can be really good at coding and that'll express itself with like if you're just writing JavaScript, but then when you're learning, I don't know, like Node for the first time,
Right.
everyone's on the same level field.
So, so the question I have for you, like from the experience you had, did you feel that the teachers or the teacher's aide showed like favoritism? They're like, oh, this guy's kind of it. Let me go help him more. Or were they pretty good with their, like all the students?
Oh, they kind of went in reverse. Like the people who struggled the most got the most
Oh, that's
attention,
awesome.
and
Yeah,
the
that's
people
really
who
good.
didn't were like, we can get your question later. We can.
Yeah, no,
You're
that's
okay. You're
awesome.
gonna be fine. We know you.
Yeah, yeah, you're gonna be
Just try.
fine. Yeah,
Figure it out.
yeah.
Yeah,
No, that's actually really
yeah,
good. Really, really, really good. And so, what was the
yeah,
tech stack that you guys learned? Um, let's start there first, and then I'll ask you some follow-up questions.
yeah. Sure. So for Unit One, like I said, it was basically foundations: HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and then we did DOM manipulation. Unit Two was the basically the men stack: MongoDB, Mongoose, Express, and Node. Unit three was the MERN stack, and that was when we started doing our group stuff, which was all of that plus React. And Unit four was Python and Flask with an optional React front end or Jinja front end, depending on what you wanted to do.
Nice. And so you guys did both Node and Python, correct? Just
Yeah. Oh, and I don't know how you say it. Postgres, Postgres
Postgres
SQL. I don't
database.
know.
Yeah, the SQL. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I think that's cool that you guys covered both, Node and Python. Um, and from the time that you started to the last day of the boot camp, what was your like schedule learning? Like how long were the classes and how much work did you do after classes? Like for instance, is this something you could have done part time or I mean, I'm sure if they have a part time program, but I'm saying in the 3 months that you took, do you think you could have worked and did the curriculum or did you have to give all your time to the course?
Yeah, it's so funny because actually I have a few things to say about this. So the Flatiron guy, right? Back to the Flatiron. When he found the full time immersive program was with Ruby, he was like, "Hold on, we have a part time one that starts around the same time with Python." And I was like, "Look, I'll be honest. I could do part. I believe in my own motivation to do part time myself. So if I'm doing
Right.
something, it's literally the motivation to just immerse myself in this
Yeah.
freaking thing, right?" So, dude, I can't. There was a few people that worked while doing this. I cannot imagine what their life
Yeah.
is like.
I can't either. Yeah.
I could barely handle it as it was. So essentially, it was a 9 to 5, right, with a 1 hour break for lunch, and then like tiny little bathroom breaks in between. And then after that, after your 9 to 5, you have like work to do. So it's not like it's done. Like you have to do labs. You have to. That's the time when you build out your projects. So I would have like legit like 16-hour days sometimes where I was just
Oh
like
my gosh.
have little breaks, but just sitting at the computer, like trying to build out my project, trying to do a lab, or trying to just like learn what the hell we learned that day. Because when I say every day we learn something new, like legit every day we learned something new. It was like a fire hose of information blasted at you. So there's not really time to just like, oh, like I mastered this, now I can like take it easy tomorrow because it's the same thing. It's like no, every day there's something new, and every day you build something with that thing that you just learned.
Yeah, no, that's kind of like what I want to know is because a lot of people are like, "Oh, you could learn something in 3 months," but I'm like, if you are learning something in 3 months, you're literally immersing yourself and you're spending literally all your waking time studying, just because of how much you learn. Because you learn HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then being able to build backend with Node and Python, which I think is like ridiculous to even consider learning all of that in 3 months. And as a strategy, like right, well, let me back up. Right, like right now, you're actively looking to get hired, right?
Right.
And then you're still like coding during your free time to make sure you remember everything you learned.
Yeah, I'm basically building right now a Flask React app and doing Code Wars and taking a Udemy course, like, and it's still like less than I was doing in the boot camp.
Oh my god, that's insane. That is crazy. This is like what people
Yeah,
don't understand. It's like it took me like 2 years to finally like make sense of stuff, and it's because like I think I had like just wasn't picking things up fast enough, and I can't imagine like trying to learn everything I did in 3 months. Like, and yes, everybody learns differently, but when you're taking a boot camp, you basically have no choice but to like, hey, I'm gonna like make the best out of this, put all my effort into it. And now that you graduated, it's it's interesting for people to know that you're still studying, you're still going through the process while trying to find a job. Now, let me ask you a question. Based on what you learned, like, what do you think like would happen if, let's say, you right now procrastinated and you maybe like, let me take a break and let me like take a month off? Do you think you would forget a lot of the
Oh
stuff,
my God.
or, or like,
Yes. Jesus Christ. Yeah, it's so funny because the teachers, like all the instructors, like they all gave parting advice and stuff, but the one thing that they were reiterating was like, we know you're tired, you're probably burned out from the boot camp. Do not stop coding. Do not like give yourself an extended break because that's how you like slip and fall off the wagon. Basically, they were like they gave two big pieces of advice. Is one is like they said a React app a day keeps unemployment at bay, and the second
yes.
one was don't lose touch with the community. They were like keep in touch with everyone, code together, even if it's on separate projects, because community is huge. That's how you stay in the network. That's how you stay like motivated.
Yeah, and that's awesome that they're like really giving you good advice. Because a lot of people are hesitant about certain boot camps because like, oh, they just want to take your money, and I'm sure some do, but also like, there are good boot camps, and I feel like the trouble is, especially if you go to one that like you went to, General Assembly, that has decent reviews. If you go to a boot camp, part of it is on you. It's like what you make like out of it and your experience, and you're taking their advice to heart. You're coding every day, you're doing all the things you have to. And a lot of people that I talk to that had negative experience with boot camps are the ones who graduated and thought that getting a job would be just very easy, and they're like, oh, I don't have to learn anymore, I could just kind of do my thing. And 2 3 months goes by, they forget everything they learned, and then they're like, oh, that boot camp sucked because I didn't learn anything. And so like it's really kind of cool to see the advice that you're asking. Let me take a question from some chat. By the way, in the chat, if you haven't smashed the like button because we have Yorgos here, what are you guys doing? And also, we got like the chat for a reason, so ask questions. Ask questions. So, question for Yorgos: do you think you would have been able to self-teach yourself the same things you learned in the boot camp? And I guess like to add to that, I would say, do you think you'd be able to uh, stitch together a curriculum that gave you the confidence that you're going to be able to get hired by yourself within 3 months? Because that's what like the bootcamp took 3 months, and so I'm assuming like you could probably learn anything, but it might take you years. So with that time frame on your own, what do you think you would accomplish?
Yeah, like let me just start off by saying I'm like a huge believer in actually being self-taught. Like I don't know, I'm gonna like do a shout out to this author called Scott Young. Uh, he has a book called I think Ultra Learning, where he basically did the MIT curriculum by doing it self-taught in 1 year for computer science. And
Yep.
his whole thing is like if you set it up well enough, you could self-teach yourself anything. And I believe that. I believe you can self-teach yourself anything. The question is, it's about efficiency, right? Like, could I teach myself, like you asked, Paul, like the to the same degree, to the same pace as a boot camp? No, because I mean that they've done like so many cohorts of this. They've made the efficiency thing with each new iteration, just like with coding, right? Every iteration is better than the last. That's what
Right.
I'm benefiting from. Mine would be the first iteration. It would be like a shitty iteration. It would work. I'm sure I could get there, absolutely. But I think it would be a long and much more painful process, which I don't want to like underestimate because a lot of people might think like, oh, I can push myself through there. But like coding has enough frustrating processes. You don't need to add more to them.
Yeah.
Like
And
you really
nobody
got to
talk.
keep your motivation up.
Yeah, nobody talks about how difficult it is, and I feel like whatever path you take, it has its pros and cons. And that's why a lot of people ask me, what took you so long to get your first job? It's because I did go that self-taught process, and I made a lot of mistakes that slow me down. And so like I tell people, if you're young enough, you're 18, 19, 20, just go get the CS degree, go that college route, because it's going to be fun and you're going to learn a lot of cool stuff. If you're older and you have the means and you find a good boot camp, I'm not against it. There's nothing wrong with it. Even I was considering, like, if I wouldn't get a job, I was thinking of going to a boot camp. And luckily, I got a job. But I feel like, if you want to get a package deal and you're able to do it, because they're not cheap, you should definitely go. And with that being said, like, what was the thought process of you, like, man, this is going to cost like $15,000? Like, how did you justify to yourself spending that much money.
Oh yeah, could I add something too?
Yeah,
In addition to
anything.
that, not just CS degree and boot camp, there were several people with CS degrees that went to the boot camp because they, and when I asked them why, I'm like, dude, you have this degree. They would basically say like, look, they teach us a lot of theory and it's very helpful, but all we learn is Java at the end of the day. And if I wanted to be full stack, I wasn't equipped with those skills. So this is the best way for me to learn them. And obviously, because they had that background, they learned a lot faster. Like the dude who built Dr. Mario had a CS degree,
Of
but
course he
he
did.
struggled with Node. Just yeah, he struggled with Node just like the rest of us, though, right? Like when you're learning a new framework, the degree is helpful because you understand the theory, you understand how to write efficient code and computer science, right? Algorithm, data structures, all that fun stuff. But the framework you still have to learn. There's no shortcutting that.
That right, and um, like I was gonna like here like finish the question about the money part that I asked, but then I want to add something to
Yeah.
that.
Oh yeah, the money. The money was a hard thing because like it's just like at face value, it's really hard when you're looking at a $15 Udemy course that says like web development 2022 and it teaches you, let's say, 60% of what the bootcamp does for $15 versus $15,000, right? And at the end of the day, it's kind of it was a lot, like I said, it was about the motivation and like the job outcome. Because like I could perhaps I could teach myself this, but would I be able to land a job? Would I be able to teach it to myself in the certain amount of time that I had? Like, if I was doing a full time, fast paced self taught thing, which I wanted to do, right? I wanted to switch, like, to reiterate why I switched, I was getting burned out in my old profession. It's not
Yeah,
like I could linger and slowly learn over years. I was like
right.
burning out now, right?
Yeah,
So if I wanted to transition, it had to have some kind of like time aspect to it. Like I need to learn in like as much as I can in 3 months and get a job and then continue learning from there. Like it never ends. But that was a big part of the financial part. Was just it had to happen sooner rather than later.
yeah, and that's amazing. And just to remind people, how old are you now?
I am 32.
So to me, I think like you're fairly young. Like I'm about to turn 42, so I have like 10 years on you. And for anybody who's out there who's like, oh, I'm not sure if the risk is worth it or if I should do it, and just speaking even from my standpoint, because I made the transition way later than Yorgos decided, and went the self-taught route, which I was literally at the like the point where it's like if I don't get this job, like I'm definitely gonna go to boot camp. And even for me, taking a risk and trying to like do something where it's just going to be like $15,000 is still worth it because even if you get a job making $40,000 a year and then in 2 years making like 60 and then in 3 years making 85, 90, it's still worth it. Where like the average income in US, like I don't know what it is, but it's a small risk to pay, I feel like, because if you go to a 4 year university, that's like a lot of money. And so totally makes sense. But uh, the question I had for you, like,
Oh yeah.
I,
Okay.
go, yeah, yeah.
I should mention when I was considering boot camp, I was also considering going for a CS degree as well. But the price for CS degrees is like crazy. It's
What
like
is it? What is it?
a lot.
Like how
Well,
much?
because also the other thing is, since
Give
I
us the
have like
number. Give us
undergrad
the
and a master,
number. Oh, that's
hold on,
actually
it's
let me back up for a second. Hold on a second. Actually, this is one thing I didn't tell you. Yurgos, he's got like a lot of degrees, and he did the whole education route. Cause did c- like tell us first all the degrees you got. Then talk about like why it would be insane for you to get a CS degree, and then that would make more sense why bootcamp was like completely the right choice for you. Talk about your journey, education, academic journey that you had for us.
yeah, we don't have to talk about that. No, I'm just kidding.
That's talk about. Okay, I just want to say this: like when he says like he just wanted to get it done with and 3 months do the boot camp is because he's been studying for such a long period for the past field that he was in that it's like you could only spend like so much time studying before like wanting to make money. You know what I mean? So yeah, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah, so essentially, I have undergrad degrees in psychology, nutritional sciences with a minor in sports nutrition and English, and then I have a master's degree in social work.
Oh my
And
God.
honestly, like I'm very done with academia. That's the other part of why I chose a boot camp. Like academia as a field, I feel like prepares you less than the job itself. Like it gives you a lot of useful things, but I wouldn't say anything replaces raw experience like that. I think you need both, of course, but I think so
Right.
much overemphasis was put on like going to college and getting a degree that we're overlooking how critical it is to have those like actual work skills. And that's what I wanted. And so that's why I chose a boot camp. Like they literally just teach you everything you're going to be doing for these projects is literally what you would do for a job, right? Like you're literally building an app. You're not like learning the theory about it. You're like learning how to do it, and then you're doing it. There's no like in between, really.
So here's a question for me. Like I totally agree with everything you said, 100%, and and a lot of pushback that people say, well, you still need to learn algorithms and data structures. And so, first of all, like how much time did you guys spend on algorithm and data structures in your curriculum versus actually building stuff? And what advice did they give you around the topic?
Yeah, honestly, like very little. We had some computer science, but like I'm so bad at like estimating, but I would say it was like maybe 2% of our stuff was spent on that. And it was mainly towards the end, and it was just mainly for the purpose of passing the job interview. It wasn't for like us to actually like let's learn it so it can improve our code. It's like they're going to ask you these questions. This is how it applies in the code. So it's not like it was completely useless, but they did tell us how it related. But the idea was like you can learn this stuff on your own. It's theory, right? But you'll learn exactly what you need to know by doing the interview. And then when you don't get a like something go well about algorithm or data structure, then you know what you need to learn about data
Yeah.
structures and algorithms.
No, and that's good to know because a lot of people freak out. And honestly, to me, the most important thing you could do is actually be able to build something. I think that's what you do like 80, 90% of your job, and that's like the most important part. So like if you couldn't build something, so like here's one, like let me back up. Like when we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, you showed me your application, and I was like, oh my god, this is so cool to see. Yurgos is building stuff, and to me, like I didn't have this like feeling in myself like, oh, he's not gonna be able to do his job because you're already building stuff and doing stuff, and it was so like refreshing rather than just try to get good at answering questions with algorithm and data structures where a lot of it is memorization, and so it was kind of cool that you're actually learning the stuff that you're going to be doing. And I was like, man, like, so there, like, because everybody's different about boot camps, and I was like, oh my god, it's awesome to see that there's legitimate boot camps that prepare their students to be able to do what they need to do. And so, and anyways, because this is the last question. When you were looking at, not the last question, but I want to know the answer. Boot camp cost versus 4-year degree computer science cost. Um, what would it cost for you to get a computer science degree?
Oh yeah, so that's what I wanted to mention. Because I had an undergraduate degree and a master's, they almost I don't think they wouldn't allow me, but they didn't want me to take another undergrad degree in computer science. They wanted me to take a master's degree
Oh my gosh.
minimum in computer science.
Yeah.
So they're
Wow.
like, before you could do that though, you needed to take these two courses, and then it would take you another 2 years, and it would cost you a total of like $80,000 or something like that. Because it's a graduate degree, I couldn't do an undergrad again. And so I was like, this is a long time and it's a lot of money. And like, I think I'm done with school. So this is kind of a no brainer in
He,
terms of those, like a boot camp degree for me.
Here's the thing that it's a very interesting point you bring up. It's like you already went through school like so many years. You're already exhausted, like learning more stuff. And another thing, it's like the opportunity cost of life. It's like 3 months, right? You struggle to get your first job, but you are eventually going to get it. And it's like, do I spend 2.5 years getting a degree and still struggling through the same difficulties of landing my first job, or do I spend 3 months and then I just hit it hard to get a job? And I think that I think it's great because you're still ahead. You're still ahead because you're going to get into the work field way faster than if you were to go to college. And that's exactly the reason why I decided not to go back to school because I'm already old, and I'm like, that's going to be additional 4 years because I don't have the benefit of like because I dropped out of school. So like I would have to literally get 4 years of full time CS degree, and I'm like I just don't have time to do that, and it's pretty cool. So any well, I'm thinking with good questions. By the way, people in the chat, don't forget to ask questions. Don't make my job difficult. I don't know what to ask.
Oh, there's
Here goes.
something I
You could
wanted to
also
say
add.
too.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, go.
Yeah. So when you were talking about like the ability to build an app, look, like I've spent a lot of time like studying and working in mental health. So like I look at a lot of things from like a socio-emotional perspective, right? Human behavior, why do we do what we do? So when I look at things like, oh, I can build an app, I don't just see it as like, oh, look, I can functionally do the job. I also think about it in terms of like human behavior and motivation. Like, and the instructors, to be honest, they had instructors reiterated this as well, because like just like I said, you shouldn't make things more difficult for yourself because you will create obstacles for yourself. And no matter how gritty you are, it's not smart or efficient to create obstacles. In the same way, it's really good to be able to build your own app. It's rewarding. Like you feel like you've accomplished something. Like it's tough sometimes to learn theory because you don't get to see the output of that theory, right? But when you build something, it's really rewarding because you get to see like, wow, I did this. I freaking made something from nothing. That's amazing. So even when it's hard, and it will be hard because you're debugging and the same fucking error comes up for 2.5 days,
Like the course
you
errors.
finally get it. Yeah, like that fucking course error, and you're and you're just like, oh my god, I did it, and it led to something that I got to create in my app. So that's like amazing. That's an amazing feeling, and it's motivating. Makes me want to keep going.
Yeah, that's another excellent thing you bring up. Like, I feel there's a lot of people who are very creative, and maybe we might just even discover that about ourselves late in life. And some people would argue the job that I had before was a dream job for anybody. Like, basically, if you're new to this channel and don't know, I used to teach Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and mixed martial arts. That's actually how I met Yurgos for a long time. And everybody's like, why are you switching careers to coding? You have so much knowledge. You could build a school. You could make so much money, blah, 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 blah. And the reason I left outside of getting injured is because I had nothing for me to show. Because after I teach a class, people get whatever benefit they got from the class. Their lives got better. They go home. But me personally, I didn't feel like I had anything to show for it. I didn't build anything. I didn't like I still felt empty. And so for me, it's kind of like exactly what you're saying is this feeling of like, oh my God, I made this. I and other people use this. You feel like at least as a human being, I feel like you have purpose that goes beyond just you. And I think that's why I think coding is rewarding and really, really awesome. So yeah. Um, so let me ask you another question. Since you did Python and Node, which one do you like better?
Oh, it's so hard to compare. Like first off, because so for my early journey when I was doing Udemy, I actually started with Python because I was doing data analytics stuff, right? And Python and R are kind of the languages for that. So later when I went to web dev, I'll be honest with you, I kind of hated JavaScript. I don't want to say I hate JavaScript now, but when you come from Python and then you go to JavaScript, it's kind of like, why is
Should be
there all
opposite.
this
Yeah,
like,
should be
why are you
different. It
making it
should be.
hard to write
Yeah.
the language? Like, I don't understand. Why are you making it more complicated?
Yeah.
So, uh, like, I prefer the Python language, but as of now, I think I prefer like the JavaScript frameworks, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's kind of hard. And I still, of course, have like a big lopsided thing of what I actually learned. Like I had 3 units on basically just JavaScript stuff, and then 1 unit on Python stuff. So it's a bit lopsided in what I know as well. So who knows? Maybe I'll grow to love more JavaScript and TypeScript, or maybe as I learn more Python, I'll fall in love with Python more. But that's kind of the fun about coding, right? Like you learn what you like and you specialize further and you go more into what you like and you specialize further and it's kind of the joy to it, right?
Yeah, to be honest, like you learn like literally the two top languages, Python and JavaScript. For me, I feel like anybody starting out just to kind of make your job easier getting hired, I say learn, basically HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and a framework and become very competent at, so learn JavaScript, React, whatever. And then if you want to do backend, learning Node, it's still in JavaScript, so it's easier. But once you get your foot in the door, I would always suggest learn a second language. And even for myself, I feel like at some point I'm going to dedicate a bunch of time for Python because it's definitely a good language for sure. But getting your first job, I think definitely can't go wrong with JavaScript. Um, when you were
Absolutely.
taking, when you were going through your bootcamp, what was the hardest thing for you to deal with on day-to-day basis when studying?
Oh my God. Like, okay, so I knew when we were going to talk about this, I had to absolutely talk about this experience I had in boot camp because they were warning us for this. You got to understand, like, we're going into an intensive program to learn something that should take you longer than 3 months. It should take you over double 3 months, but somehow we're compressing it into 3 months. So that doesn't mean like I don't know how I think we have some way of casting it in our mind. Like that means that we work really, really hard and like it works out. And I don't know, like there's like a fantasy that goes along with that, right? But how it actually was they were warning us from unit one. Unit two, everyone is going to lose their shit. Everyone's mental health is going to go down the toilet. Do not keep silent. Reach out to us if you're struggling. It's okay. We expect you to struggle. They said this like ad nauseum because that's when they start to introduce Node, right? So I was like, yeah, okay, but like I'm good at taking care of myself. Like I know I feel comfortable feeling uncomfortable, but when unit two hit, I was like so frustrated because I realized previously I had this understanding of like there's not understanding and then there's understanding, right? And after unit two, I realized, oh, there's like five different levels to not understanding something. There's like it's not just like understand or not understand. There's like many layers deep of not getting something, and you're just barely trying to scratch the surface of like not understanding in a good way, and then finally understanding maybe a little bit so that you can use the stuff. So it's not necessarily like this fantasy that you're mastering a framework. Like you're trying to learn how to use it, and that's why they have stuff like what's that called? You're not is it YAGNI? You ain't gonna need it. It's like an acronym,
Oh,
so you don't like overlearn
I have
things. You
no
don't.
idea. Yeah, yeah, I have no idea. But
Yeah, it's like an acronym.
I'm so bad with acronyms. Like,
It's like there's like dry code, there's KISS, keep it simple, stupid,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
YAGNI, you ain't gonna need it, which means like don't try to overlearn something if you're not gonna need it because there's so much out there. You just need to
So,
learn what you need to use at the moment, nothing more.
yeah, what's interesting? It seems like you basically in boot camp learn how to be able to learn on your own, and it's something that also like I experienced in jiu-jitsu. Like when you're teaching somebody, is teach them enough to be able to make sense of figuring stuff out on their own and knowing where to look stuff up. I think like those yeah, I think that's the most important skill that you could develop is learn how to learn. But to do that, you need to have basic understanding of like where to find answers and stuff like that. I think it's pretty awesome. Um, so now, like, I have so many questions, and people ask questions. I know some of you guys are asking questions, but ask questions specifically to Yorgos. I think this is your time to take opportunity. Otherwise, like, I could talk to Yorgos on the phone and not invite him. You know what I mean? But it'll be nice for you guys to kind of ask him questions while he's here. You don't have to. I'm just saying. Just take advantage of it. But the question that I have for you is outside of like still coding, outside of doing code wars and doing extra classes on Udemy, what are you doing to prepare yourself, like either by yourself or the process of the boot camp to start going on interviews and your resume or your LinkedIn? What are you doing in those departments?
Oh yeah, so like so like I said, we have an outcomes team that every Tuesday at a certain time we'd spend some hours workshopping this kind of stuff actually. So they would do a class on this is how you want a tech LinkedIn to look. This is where you want to put this. This is how you build a brand statement. This is how you leverage your past career for your like tech career. This is how you write an ATS resume, which is a resume written so that it could be read by like whatever scanning
The
AI
machines, yeah.
or whatever reads it for those keywords so that it will get to an HR person. This is how you, what else was there? Like, this is how you set up your GitHub. So it's like a professional GitHub, but shows your personality and also like allows people to like look at it and it looks like professional, right? And then they have the same thing for making a portfolio website. So like all of this had to be done by a week after bootcamp ended in order to qualify for job support. So like you
Wow.
had to hit deadlines as well. So
Wow.
so like it was all of this in addition to the other projects we were doing while doing the boot camp. We also had these outcomes projects.
And you know what's cool about that is that everything you just mentioned, like there's somebody should like bullet point that, and we should have you come back and talk like do a show based on each individual bullet point because everything you just described like past like 3 seconds, those are all the most important things outside of like just learning to code that you kind of have to do in order to increase your chances of getting hired. And I think that's like really awesome that bootcamp, General Assembly, and they're not paying me. God damn it, they should sponsor the show because we're giving a lot of good things about them. I'm gonna have to come up with some negativity stuff, but everything that like they have you do, I think it's awesome because it's setting you for success. And part of it, like I also wonder if it's also for those people that did that whatever that agreement is, where if you don't get a job, you don't have to pay, that they want to make sure that they're so confident in their graduates and give enough resource that those guys are getting jobs. So, they're ending up paying their tuition if they took that route. But I think it's really awesome. If if you
Oh
were
yeah.
to, go ahead.
Oh no, just something related to that. So like they were definitely from the beginning outcomes support started. So in our class, I think we had like 90 something students and it dropped down to 60 by the end, right?
Wow.
And so that means we had like a pretty strong dropout rate. But the other thing was a few of them were not because it was too hard or too rigorous. A few were actually because they got jobs before the boot camp even ended. Like
Wow.
that's because the outcomes team kind of helped them workshop everything. They started applying of their own volition, and then they were already like getting job offers and applications. So it was kind of like amazing to see this happening. And they said that's not super uncommon. It's not. It is rare, but it's not uncommon that people will get a job before the boot camp is over, or even before their CS degree is over if they're in the middle of that. It depends
Wow.
on
Yeah.
you, right? Like they want to see that.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah, no, I think that's really cool that some people were able to do that. So a couple of questions for you. Engine Boy was asking, have you done any work with Django, and what your thoughts about it? I guess that's the first part of his question, and then I have a follow-up question to that.
Yeah, so it's so interesting because originally the curriculum was set to teach Django. It was supposed to be Python Django for Unit 4, and then a week before they had decided to change it to Python and Flask in order to like teach us a more lightweight thing that we could use to build an app faster. So I could not give you an opinion on Django, but it's actually something I'm going to learn. So like I'm looking forward to learning it. And they did actually, so even though they didn't teach it, they gave us all the materials that they would have given us to teach
Oh,
it
that's
in addition
awesome.
to the Flask stuff.
So
So
I
I'm
just want
looking forward
to,
to go through that, some stuff like that.
yeah, I want to say that I'm not a Python person, but everybody that I talk to that learned Python, they all say learn Flask first because you get a better understanding of how to build an API from scratch. Because what they said about Django, Django does a lot of that stuff for you like upfront without like it makes it easier for you to do certain things, and so some of that stuff is obfuscated and you're just not sure how it works. It just works. So that's what I heard. So it'll be interesting to have you come back and talk about, was that the case? By learning Flask, your understanding of Python development was better uh, if you were to use Django. That'd be interesting. And then Brian, says some of those ISA from some boot camps are pretty sketchy, and I think yes, I agree with that. And I think if you are going to go to boot camp, I mean, $15,000 is a lot of money, but doing like a payment agreement where you just pay that yourself, I think it's way better because you don't want to be tied down to any contractual like things like I say, in my opinion. But if you can't, then you have no choice. You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah,
And then
it's basically like a tax.
and Big B 420 says cool, so you can put General Assembly applicant on your resume, uh, which, or I'm saying maybe that means like that you graduated from General Assembly. But here's the thing I was going to say. Like I just saw an article. I think it was by Rutgers. I don't know what it is, and it's do hiring people how much value they put on a. I'm like my brain just froze. So I can't speak, so I apologize. But how much value do these hiring managers put on bootcamp graduates? And they said that 70% of companies that are hiring, they actually like, yeah, that actually does mean a lot. So when you were going to the bootcamp, like, what were they saying in terms of like, uh, what were your chances of getting hired because you graduated of a bootcamp, or did they even not have this conversation?
Oh yeah, they had like in-depth statistics, not just by year, but also by quarter. It was like very in-depth and by like amount of time it took post boot camp. So the other interesting thing I wanted to definitely talk about, a benefit I literally forgot about, two benefits about like a boot camp, maybe General Assembly in particular. One of them is that some of these boot camps, when they've been around long enough and they are consistent in quality, they actually start producing a reputation. So like I'm still in the network of the cohort that I'm in, and a few of the people who've gotten hired, they're like, "Oh, we know General Assembly. We have hired people from there before.
Oh,
We
nice.
know those you guys know." So it's like a reputable name. And the other thing is to not forget when this boot camp, which has been around for I don't know how long, but you have enough cohorts graduating, you now have an alumni network who work in different companies that you might want to get hired for. So one of the strategies was literally to look at a company you might want to be hired for, look at how many General Assembly grads are in there and search by that, and then reach out to them, ask for like any tips or advice for applying for that company or whatever. So like networking basically, right? And so I think that really also shouldn't be underestimated. Just like the power of a network, that's a huge thing.
Yeah, so much good stuff here, and totally agree with you on Power Network. Another thing that we talked off camera a couple of weeks ago, or um, is something about kind of getting involved in the community by either blogging or putting out content. What did they say to you guys about that, or what advice did they give you in terms of like kind of building your network and building your, I guess, developer brand, if you want to call it that?
Yeah. So they did. Um, they gave a lot of core advice, right? Like everybody should have a good LinkedIn, no matter what your preferences are. Everyone should have a good GitHub, a good, well-written resume with like these tech words. What else was there? A good portfolio website, but and then as much as possible, like network, right? Other than that, though, they said like try to get creative with how you like distinguish yourself. You should, if you like writing, then write a blog about your experiences. If you are a podcaster, then podcast about your experience. If you make YouTube videos, do that. If you, you know, to that effect, essentially, right? Like you kind of like make your own unique mark. Some people will do like pro bono work. Some people will just literally just try to make an app with a group right off the bat and make that be their mark, right? Like if you get into an interview, you could be like, hey, look at this project I'm working on right now with like a big group. So the idea is to differentiate yourself however seems to fit you. And so I've been like writing a blog where I was writing about my experience in the boot camp, what I learned, the unintended effects, how I kept motivated, and soon to be about my job hunting journey.
Wow, no, that's awesome. Really cool. It's just amazing that, like, I heard a lot of horror stories about boot camps, and like to hear your experience and then the way you describe stuff is basically what I also tell people on this YouTube channel. It's like there's a lot of stuff that you have to do to help you stand out, and it's amazing that those all the things that you learn in your boot camp, like I'm still like in this belief that they literally want you to succeed, which is weird because a lot of times when people talk about boot camps, it's like, oh, they just take your money, they just take your money. But everything you described I'm like, man, that's no bad things about you know at least so far. If you were to, since you're speaking about it, if you were to say, if they were to change something to do things better, what like recommendation would you have for them? Like that you felt like, man, like this was a little bit tough or what have you.
Oh yeah, let me make sure remind me in case I forget. I did want to like give a shout out to like specifically like how helpful the instructors were because it's like very important to me to do that. But to answer your question first, so I don't forget that. Um, to be honest, like I'm gonna like shit on a part of it a little bit. I hope it doesn't get me in trouble, but
Why would it?
to be honest,
We
it's
want
the
to be
outcomes
honest.
part.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like the outcomes part. There's definitely some of the classes we had for outcomes. I would have preferred to have been coding, and a lot of like let's say like half of what they said, I felt like could have just been a PDF. Like I could have just read a PDF and followed the instructions for that, and made my LinkedIn, for example. I didn't need like a 2 hour like thing, and especially in a boot camp when your time is like squeezed for every last drop, like you notice that time that you lose from sitting in like an outcomes thing that could have been a PDF. Like you really keenly feel that, right? You have like a week to learn a new technology and build something. I don't have time to sit around and like do something that could have taken me 10 minutes if I just read it, you know? It feels like a lot of fluff. But I think that's probably also the sell is like I mean, even for me, right? Like I said, I went for it because I thought it would help me get a job. So I think have the idea of having an outcomes team was helpful in like convincing people to be like, oh, I'll be taken care of. I don't have to worry and flail. It's like almost like an emotional safety net. Not to say
right.
like everything they did was useless, because obviously there's a lot of utility to it. It's more about like how they stretched the use in terms of
Yeah.
like time, right?
And what was the shout out that you wanted to send to the?
Yeah. Oh my God. Like when you were saying that they cared, like, dude, they seriously cared. Because I don't know how they get paid if they're like salary or hourly, but these people were there like I was on maybe 16 hours, they were on maybe 16 hours, like some of them were on for 12 hours. It's like a crazy amount of time and commitment to help us like debug when we were struggling, to help us with our projects when we just didn't know where to go and point us in the right direction. Like the instructional staff was like amazing. They were, and on top of that they were such nice people. Like they were so supportive. I consistently got the feeling that they wanted me to succeed, not because of it was their job or whatever. It's just like they literally loved the feeling of helping people along their coding journey. Like I literally felt that from them, and I'm not blowing smoke. Like I definitely don't do that. These were just superb people, and to be fair, to be like completely fair, I don't know if this was just my cohort, right? Because there's several cohorts in General Assembly. I might have just lucked out with like a super good one,
Yeah.
but like Shahzad was like this wise like dude who was incredibly versed in theoretical knowledge of computer science, but he could break it down so easily, and he was there constantly with advice and also really pushing the self care. He was like, "This is going to be a hard 3 months. Your health comes first, no matter what, even before coding. Your health always comes first." Then there's Ben, who is the second of the third head instructors, Ben Manley, such like a funny dude, but like always there, patient for all the questions, no matter how much it may have like derailed or slowed down the lesson. He wanted to explain everything for everyone anytime anyone was stuck, which is so important, right? You don't want to fall behind and not understand as the lesson continues. And finally, David, who is like just like the sweetest dude ever, and was just always there to help and debug. And he's like the CSS wizard. He could just basically make anything look like anything. He was amazing. And super helpful with like understanding concepts as well. So it was just like, and then the IAs, I could talk about them forever, but there was like 9 of them, so that would take too long. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
they all like just butt off to help us. It was like
That's awesome.
ridiculous how
That's
helpful they.
really good to hear. That's really good to hear. So let's take a look at some user questions. So by the way, throw some more questions, guys, in the chat. We're slowly working through them. Uh, Pickle Juice, love the name. He says, "I just jumped in. Does Yurgos, aside from Bootcamp, have created an app you used to show off at an interview? Also, do you believe having a passion project on the side is it a must for getting into coding?" Um, yeah, so let's start with that question. I know Sharon had one too.
Oh, this is a great this is a great question. Yeah, I think when they were talking about like for outcomes, right? Bootcamp grads versus CS grads, they said where CS grads will shine is obviously with like the theoretical knowledge and ability to explain things and the ability to like pick things up faster because they have that background. However, the strength and advantage bootcamp grads have over most CS grads is we have several portfolio projects by the end. That means we have several pieces to show to interviewers like, look, I literally built this. You can look at my work. I did the job you might be hiring for. Like you could look through, critique it, and let me know. So that's like a big strength. I left the program with like four projects, four apps, right? And granted, they're like simple. I don't want to like make you think like I built an AI thing, text recognition stuff, but nonetheless, I built them in different technologies. They did different functions, and they had like authorization and stuff like that. As for the passion project, I think in general, from my understanding thus far, and like granted, I'm still kind of new to the interviewing scene, but as per the advice they gave, like they want you to have an interest in coding. So whether you have a passion project or you just are interested in learning a new technology, they just want to know that you're actually passionate about coding, right? Because it gets hard. Like as Paul will tell you, there's some really hard points in coding. So if you don't like really enjoy it, then you're not going to stick with it. And they want to know you're going to stick with it if they're going to hire you, right? So they want you
Right.
they want to see that you enjoy it, whether that's a passion project or like, hey, I just started learning this new technology or this new language.
Yeah, and then also Sharon was asking, so how do you decide what kind of app to build to make your own version of a popular app? Or what do you do? Because I know you're a big fan of coffee, and I think the project you're currently working has something to do with coffee. So you could maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, there's like, there's a lot of ways to go about this. Like to be honest, it's so funny to me because I'm naturally like a very creative person, right? So I could think of like a million app ideas, but some people really struggled with like, oh, what should I make? So that's literally what they did. They were just like, let me just recreate this app that I've seen before, and that's like a fine way to do it. Like you don't have to build the next like new thing. It's like practice, right? It's for fun. But like for me, like I can think of a million things I would want to have access to like as a useful product. So for me, I'm like, what are my interests, and how can my technology like help my interests? So whether that's like a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu app repository or
Yeah,
what I'm building now, as Paul said, was a specialty coffee app. It's like a basically an API that stores all this information about specialty coffee, roaster, origin, region, farmer, tasting notes, varietals, and then on the back end, once I finish it, because it's still in progress, I want to add some kind of like data analytics so that when there's enough stuff, you could choose your favorite coffees and it'll have a recommendation engine, ideally. So that's like what I'm going towards. And that will actually double as my future thing I want to learn because I don't know how to do recommendation engines. I don't know like how to write data into the back end quite yet, but that's like the fun of it, right? I don't know, but I'm willing to put myself out there and give it a shot and try it and learn what I need to learn in order to get it done. And that's kind of what I think they want to see, right? Are you self motivated enough to do that yourself? Because it's going to be a requisite for the job if you don't know the technology.
yeah, yeah. No, and I think that's the cool part about something that draws me to coding is that you're constantly learning new things. And for me, that's interesting. It's kind of like self-perpetuated mechanism for you to keep learning and adding value to your next company you're going to get hired because it's like you have to learn new things, and if you're learning new things that means you're staying relevant. So for me, it's like the process of climbing up this developer ladder is like built into the process of actually being in the field, which is kind of interesting. So if you do this long enough and you learn new things, you're going to get better. um, and somebody asked, because you mentioned that you wrote a couple of blogs, which blogging platform do you use and where can we find your blog?
Oh, I'm using Medium right now. I think the name, I could be wrong. I think the name of my blog is the same as this Twitter handle you see below me. I could double check later and maybe Paul could put it up somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. You could like throw it in the chat too, the link, or if you send it after the show, it's fine too. Um, yeah, that's good. And so, like, why did you even start writing a blog? Like, what was the motivation? Because that's work. That's extra work you have to do. Like, So
Oh, I just noticed the chat thing. That's so funny.
yeah, I'm a
This
bad
is
host. I
fun. There's
probably
some
should
good
have mentioned
questions.
it earlier. Yeah, yeah. And if you find something that I missed, definitely pick it up and
Oh,
just
yeah.
say it.
Okay, so one of
Ho-
them
ho-
was Edward. That if he compares front end and back end, where did I struggle the most, and what would I recommend for self-taught programmers? Okay, so
Great
this was a
question, by the
weird
way.
thing for me because I didn't realize in my head, like I guess I had said like back end is super complicated and logical, and front end is a bit more intuitive. But like when I actually did it, I was like, for me personally, back end was way easier, way more straightforward, and front end is like a mess that you just try to organize. So I prefer back end, but like I noticed people in the cohort, and that's like the fun thing about doing it with so many people. People are better at different things. It just depends on you, right? And I actually talked to a senior engineer at Khan Academy about like his focus because I was asking him where I should specialize, and he literally said, like I'm terrible, or no, he didn't say I'm terrible. He's probably great. He's being humble, but like he said, he finds a certain front end easier than back end, but some people have a preference, right? Like some people find back end easier, and it's just a preference. It's not like one is like literally harder than the other. It's just what you get good
It
at and what you prefer.
it's funny that you say that because the more like JavaScript I do, like the easier stuff gets. Where CSS, certain errors that you run into, you're just like, I have no idea what the hell's happening right now. So most people much rather like work on solving bugs in like the code rather than like CSS on the front end, which to me is funny. So I feel like CSS is easy to get started and get dangerous, but once you really dive into it, some of the errors you have, you're like, oh my god, like what is happening here? Now here's an interesting question because you know, this guy says, I'm 29 years old this year. Is it possible for me to switch to careers into programming, job like web, mobile dev? Which path most fits a 29-year-old man? Udemy, YouTuber, whatever, bootcamp. First, I'm going to say yes, you're too late. Life is over. Game is over. There's nothing you could do. Just give up. No, I'm just messing with you, buddy, because like Putro, I hope I pronounced your name right. I started to learn to code at 36, and I'm 41 right now, turning 42. So I felt that it was still worth it at 36 to put in the work, even though it took me forever to get hired. So 29, I wish I started at 29. Dude, you're literally at the prime age to hit it hard, and whatever you decide, and you're gonna make it because you're literally like Yorgos's age, and he did it. He's talking about his journey. So, what tips would you give for Putro? I'm really bad with names. Like, cause you guys the same age, same path. Like before you even decided to switch careers, did you have any reservations? Actually, I forgot to ask that question.
Um, yeah, it's actually so funny. I just wanted to like mention this because I think I thought about it several times and I forgot. But there was like older people in this cohort. So like the idea that like, you know, you're too late. There was people like I don't know, one of the older people was like 50 or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, no,
And
of course.
starting time, and I'll be honest with you, I was totally biased. I was like, this dude's maybe too old for this, but he was doing great. He was doing better in some
Nice.
things than me at the end of the day. And I think that's like it speaks more to like your work ethic, right? How much are you willing to put in? And it wasn't about age. It's like literally how much are you putting in? That's what your output tends to like align with, right? Um, but what was the other thing? Was there something else?
What advice would you give someone, kind of feeling that way? And also, did you have any reservations? Like maybe it's not the right choice, or did you know, like, okay, I'm just gonna do this?
Yeah, so like even before the boot camp, I'm like a generally cautious person, so I don't like just jump into something. So I did. like I said, I was doing these Udemy courses before. I was actually diving into data analytics, like I said, and I was doing this like program made by Google on Coursera actually, and it was like a Google data analytics thing, and I was almost done with it when I realized like the data thing is like so for me. I'm really more interested in the coding, and so I started learning web development. And that one was on Udemy, and that one was fascinating to me. And so I was just like learning web development and Python coding at the same time, and I was like, oh, I can't get enough of this. And so like the decision, I didn't really have many reservations about it, to be honest. Like the only reservation I did have was like the big one, like will I be successful in getting a job and making this transition? But it was never about was this the right choice in terms of tech, in terms of software engineering. That I didn't question.
Yeah, and I think like what's awesome is that you could see people, in many walks of life that literally did the same change and were able to find success. Um, like, and I think that gives people motivation to be like, hey, I could do this. And so for me, it's funny because I did the same things you did, except I did it much later in my life. And then whenever like I hear someone younger be like, "Oh, I'm not sure if this is gonna work," I'm like, "God damn it! I wish I was your age when I made this decision because you're still ahead. You still, have a lot going on, and it's pretty awesome. It's pretty cool."
Yeah, as per like the CSS thing, it's so funny because they they warned us like, you know, you might hate errors, but you're gonna really hate it when you don't have errors and there's something wrong. And I was like, oh God, they're so right. Like I actually don't mind errors anymore. That's like a big thing for me. I They don't super bother me. It's kind of like really interesting to find out like what went wrong and to like
Yeah,
figure it out and not just get
I'm gonna, I'm gonna,
frustrating, but
I'm
it's
gonna.
like it feels like
I was gonna say like everybody gets frustrated though. Like everybody gets frustrated, but
totally.
the fact that you're
Oh, no,
still like excited for the build, like you're like, oh, I wonder what it is. It'll be cool to figure it out, and like the
yeah,
journey of solving it is exciting. But I was about to
yeah.
say nobody gets
Oh,
excited for course
yeah.
errors.
Let me differentiate what I meant. Because what I meant was when I came into this, I saw a bug or an error, and my thought was like, "Oh man, I suck at this because I got an error."
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Right?
that's yeah,
And now I completely different. It's like it literally has nothing to do with me. This is just literally what happens to everyone who has coded
yeah,
ever in web development. Like this is
yeah.
not a personal thing. This is a part of the job.
Right. And what's interesting, like I do my live stream on Tuesdays where I'm coding a project live. And I literally call that stream my fail stream because of how much stuff goes wrong and I look like complete idiot. But I feel like the reason why I do that stream is to kind of showcase that that's a process for everybody. Nobody's gonna write perfect code that just works. Just doesn't happen. Take a look at any video game that comes out, like you, Cyberpunk 2027, whatever the game is, it's still broken. You know what I mean? And it sucks, but that's just the way it is. It's just stuff doesn't work like you intend, and that's part of the journey. It's part of the process. So you should embrace it and just be like, hey, it's fun. Um, but let me ask you a question. Have you encountered any like negativity in terms of like being on a community where people like either did not give you help or find some people that were like not being positive, I guess, with like what you're wanting to do, or did you feel like you had a pretty good experience all around, just in general?
Yeah, I think I had a pretty good experience to be honest.
That's awesome.
I think like the most negativity that was there was just, I mean, it's like really hard. I can't overstate that because it's like you're devoting most of your life to something, and for during this time period you're in the boot camp, and then on top of that you're spending most of that time not understanding something. So I spent most of 3 months not understanding something like that. So like any negativity from people or even myself was just like, oh man, I don't know if I can do this. Like this is hard. That's the kind of negativity. Nobody was like a dick. Nobody was like, oh, you don't get it. This is so easy. Most of the time, if like you didn't get something, someone would always be there and just like say like, oh, let me walk you through it. You're gonna get it. You're gonna. I had the same problem. I can walk you through it. That was like a really nice, and again, that's kind of like the other benefit of boot camp, and as like a social worker I recognize is the power of community cannot be like overstated. That when you have a community working in the same direction as you and everyone's supportive, it's a lot easier. It's like loads easier.
No, it's awesome, and I totally agree about the community. And I feel like it's awesome that you had positive experience, but I just want to say there are going to be sometimes people you're going to run into, especially when you're starting out, who might think they're better than you. And honestly, whenever you encounter people like that, just don't listen to them. Just do your work, and you're going to get there because there's always negative people out there, and you just can't control what somebody might say to you. And so just that's why I kind of like on my podcast, as you notice, like I invite people like Yorgos, like pretty positive people, because that's all we need. We need to have a proper community where we could all like support each other and grow and be honest with each other rather than complaining or talking or dealing with negative people. And so, but they are out there. They are out there for sure. Um, you know. So, any like hold on, let me see like how we are on time. Like getting almost hitting hour and a half. But anything that maybe I didn't ask or mention that you feel like people should know in terms of like your experience learning to code or your journey
Yeah.
in your bootcamp?
Um, I think it's important to realize there's like I think there was an early on question about like is there anything you can learn in a boot camp that you can't get in like a Udemy course? I think to be honest with you, the the big benefit I got, maybe the number one benefit I got from it, and this might sound like trite, but I swear to God, like please listen up, this is huge, is just to get really comfortable with not knowing things and being uncomfortable learning new things. Like it sounds like so dumb, but it's like literally the foundational skill for this job, right?
Yes.
Is like you're going to learn something new. You're not going to get it, and you're going to have to keep trying again and again, and you might even fail again and again, and you will have to learn to cultivate the ability to just keep going. And
Uh,
that is what I got from this because I
wait,
had
wait,
to
wait,
do it for 3 months.
wait. Are we talking about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Are we switch topics? Talk about
Yeah,
Brazilian
literally.
Jiu-Jitsu right now? But
Yeah,
it's
and
funny,
by the way, I
like,
found some people who trained me too. So that was like
nice.
really cool. I was like,
So
oh, you get it, you get it.
the joke that I used to make with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because we both trained for a long time, is that it's an art of like constantly being frustrated and just working through like just frustration. It just never ends. And I felt like when I started to learn coding, I was like, oh, I got this, because I had all this practice of like dealing with frustration. But what you just said, all kidding aside, is super important, because literally, if you were to have one superpower to be like, I'm going to be successful in coding, is exactly what you just described. It's something that, like I felt as well. And I'm like, thank God that like you embrace it, and you're just like, yes, let's do this. Um, I still don't know anything. People like here's the thing. Like I was gonna say, and the more I learn, the more I know how much I don't know, and how like you know like I feel like when I learned CSS, I was like, I know CSS, I know how to do this. So like I learned JavaScript, I know like blah blah, and then like 6 months goes by, I'm like, man, I gotta like keep my like be quiet because I don't know anything. I just gotta take it easy and keep studying. Yeah, it's awesome, man. Um, yeah, let's see. Anybody in the chat ask some more questions? Because my voice starting to go like around this time, so if you guys have good questions, we'll definitely answer. And don't worry, I'll get your ghost. Come on more podcasts. He's an awesome dude to chat with. And if you see any questions that we missed, like you could bring them up. Um, but now that you're done with bootcamp, how do you balance your life with like, okay, I still have to do like personal stuff, but at the same time, I also have to get a job, like, because that's the hardest thing I had is finding that balance between staying healthy, because in my case, I just was like, I need to get a job. I need to get hired. And when I got hired, I was like, I need to not get fired. I need to keep working. And the one mistake I made, I let my health go pretty badly. Like, and I'm finally in the process like, hey, Your health is super important, so you have to make time for it. Coding and studying is not like the only thing you could do. So like any advice on how to balance things out? Um,
Yeah. It's so funny because even in the boot camp, it's like sitting for 16 hours. That doesn't mean I didn't exercise. Like, it was something I was able to carry over from like my past, right? Is like a very simple tip of like anything is better than nothing, essentially, right? So we would have these 6-minute bathroom breaks. So I would go to the bathroom, maybe I'd make a tea, and then in between that, I'd do push ups or squats, like,
nice,
or do
nice.
something, right? And so, like, it's kind of like fitting it in and using those breaks as like a cue to take care of yourself. So you might not want to do push ups. I don't know what you want to do to take care of yourself, but like literally schedule it in. Don't make it oh man, when I remember it, it will happen. Like, set a timer. Like, I have a Pomodoro, so like every 40 minutes, it goes off, and that's like my 40-minute time block is what I work. And then I'll do some exercise. I'll maybe like make myself like a green shake, or I'll make a snack, and then I'll do another 40-minute block. So it's like really good to work in blocks, not just to keep yourself like on top of things when you're working, but also to keep on top of yourself when you have a break, right? Like, taking breaks is so important if you want to be effective. It's not just like a nice thing to have. It's also effective for your work as well. So, um, yeah, like breaking that up by having these blocks of concentration and blocks of relaxation of like five. It doesn't have to be a lot. 5 minutes is like everything, right? Oh my God, I love that, Sharon. Doing some hit when you stand up for a break. That's amazing.
Nice.
Oh,
Also,
fantastic.
actually, um, Northern Chimp had a great question. Any advice to follow before you start a bootcamp? Like, for instance, now that you have this information, what would you recommend someone going to into bootcamp? Something that could do that help him have a better experience.
Yeah, like I think there's two things. Despite what they say, you don't need anything to start a boot camp. Even though that's true, I would still learn JavaScript, HTML, and CSS beforehand. I would like 100% learn the foundational skills before it's required of you, and then join the boot camp. The second, it would make your life easier, right? You want to hedge your like you want to create as many advantages as you can for yourself going in. This and that stuff you can do part time. It's very much like available to you to like do JavaScript part time. The other thing, though, would essentially be before going to a boot camp, especially if it's like an immersive one, like the one I did. Definitely like plan your life accordingly. Like, literally tell people that might want to hang out with you, hey, I'm doing a boot camp. I'm going to be drastically less available. Don't expect to like go to a lot of social functions. Like, I actually had a wedding in the middle of this boot camp that I officiated for, which was like not a great
Oh
idea,
wow.
but I planned around it from like 3 months beforehand, right? Like, I had to plan so much so I could be gone for one day for this wedding because I was in the midst of my group project and I was like actually the Git manager during this time. So I was like, oh my god, this is this is crazy. So I was like, I made plans beforehand. I instructed people how to do stuff when I was gone, and just again have proper expectations going in. Like, while I'm in this boot camp, this is my main focus right now: my health, and then this boot camp, right? Uh, Everything else will have to take second fiddle just for a temporary amount of time. This is not sustainable long term. No one would tell you to do this long term, right? We're not telling you to become like workaholics that like do this like 16 hours a day every day for the rest of your life until you retire. It's literally for the portion of this boot camp. Like, have this as your focus.
Sorry, I got distracted, Yorgos. I apologize. Sorry, I forgot our memories and how deep our friendship goes, and so I was kind of looking at this for a
Oh
second.
my god!
Oh
Holy
my
crap!
gosh, look at that people are like, what is this going on? What are they doing there? What is happening here? No, Yorgos and I, we've been friends forever, and we're our main bond besides our friendship is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is an amazing activity, and I feel like it has so much that correlates with coding in terms of like the learning process, the community, and the struggle you have. It's kind of amazing. But yeah, so man, dude, this was amazing conversation, and definitely will love to have you back again whenever you want. I know you'll be doing a lot of work, and will definitely keep us posted on your interview process. And as you start going on more interviews, we'll definitely would like to pick your brain. Any tips that could help somebody else. But I already feel my voice going. Otherwise, I would talk forever. So, any last parting thoughts, Yurgos, on anything, anything that you would like to add?
Uh, you know, this is kind of like a personal thing, but just in general, right? Like if you're thinking about making a transition into tech, or like, you're starting a new career, you're learning a new skill, I think it's always a good policy to just be kind and patient with yourself, right? Like, we're all on this planet, that with like, and we're just these human beings in this huge universe. I think sometimes we make the things that are, I don't know, not so big a lot bigger, and at the end of the day, not to be, leave it on a depressing note, but we're all going to die, right? So when you die on your deathbed, are you going to be saying like, man, like I was such an idiot because I couldn't master this framework? Or are you going to be like, well, I tried my best to learn this new technology and that's all I could have asked for? Like
Exactly.
it's really just keep some perspective in your journey.
And it's so true, like to like remind ourselves of that, because it's so easy to forget. And at the end of the day, life is too short. Like we all had experience where we were reminded of this, and so like that's amazing. Like thanks for that, Yurgos. You know, and leave us on a deep thought about existence and stuff. No, but honestly, like if I didn't
We're all going
like
to
have
die. Don't forget.
to be honest, if I didn't have that as a reminder, I would have probably never applied myself ever. And like you know me for a long time, and and I know you for a long time, and everybody, doesn't matter who the person is, we all struggle. We all have stuff that we have to carry on our shoulders, and so kind of like it's important to remind ourselves of all of that and to be like, hey, we're just human beings, and all we could do is do our best. And at the same time, we just in a way, like you said, depressing note, I think it's an empowering note to be like, hey, at any moment in our life, we could just do our best and see where it takes us, you know? And so it's pretty awesome. And Bro Trippin's here. I love that name. The dude's deep AF, lol. No, dude, we get pretty, like, very good conversations on this show,
That's the only
you
way
know?
I know how to do
Yeah, that's the only way to do it,
it.
you know? Uh, so everybody, thank you so much. I'm sure we'll have Yurgos back on again. Before my voice goes, I want to say without you guys, this community would not exist. A lot of you guys, so like we're part of Coding After. No, you're not part of Coding After 30 community. I am part of your community, and I just want to thank you for allowing me to be share my experience with you guys. I really appreciate all of you. Thank you, Yurgos, for everything that you do. And I just gonna say, by the way, just I'm gonna say it on the show. I have so much respect for Yogos as a friend. He has helped me out so much in my life, more than you guys will ever know, unless I talk about how personal my life is, like whatever. So thank you for just being a good part, not just on the stream, but in my life as well. And I just want to say I messed up because I told Yorgos I could hang out with him today, and I forgot that I had family stuff. It was my fault. So I just want to make that public apology, and I'm still gonna next weekend for sure. I'm clearing my day. We're gonna do it because I miss you, my man, and it's great to have you here. So thank you so much for coming. And any last
Thank
words?
you for
Again, gonna give it to you. No, oh, wow, that's amazing. Yeah, you're welcome. Very, very awesome. So
Yeah,
everybody, thank you. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say actually I'm busy next week, so I can't. No, I'm just kidding.
Fucker.
But no, thank you for having me. Thank you.
You you like passive aggressive. I don't believe. I don't even know. Like, yeah. But Oh, by the way, there was a question a while ago. Somebody asked, did you go in person, online boot camp? Was this in New York or was it like where you live? Like, how did
Oh,
it work?
I was between online and in person. The only difference would have been a commute time, so I decided to go completely online. But it was like still most of the people were in New York, so it was
Okay.
a weird
Yeah.
hybridized thing. And COVID was happening; we had another wave, so they shut down the New York one anyway,
Oh,
merged it
wow.
into the.
Yeah.
It was a whole thing. Yeah,
Yeah, where you're from, that's like what, like hour and 15-minute commute by train, something like that.
yes, yes.
Plus, like from the train station. Yeah, no, it's cool to go online. I feel like it saves so much time. But anyway, thank you everyone. Thank you, Yorgos. We'll see you guys next time. I appreciate all of you guys. Love you all. But time to go. Rest up, drink some tea, and relax. So wherever you guys are, I hope you guys have the best rest of the week and weekend. And I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you, Yorgos. Thank you, everybody. Bye bye.